Good morning, brewers. Today you join me on a brew day. As the sheet says, we're brewing an Irish red ale. Currently warming up strike water and sparge water. So it's the HLT is it's going to be sparge water, and because it's got the Herms coil in there, it also acts as the temperature control for the Herms coil, and I'll show you how that's connected up in a minute. And typically we're mashing in at 68 today, but I run the Herms coil at 2 degrees above, and that seems to work. And strike water temperature is 75. I'm currently at 65, so we're waiting for that to warm up. Grain's been milled, all in here, apart from the roasted barley component. That'll go in, so that's been milled separately, and that'll go in at sparge. We don't want any of those tannins and things coming out of that dark roasted grain, so that'll go in later. So we're all ready to go. We're just circulating around on the HLT and the kettle. I'm using the kettle for strike water because the HLT I need for the Herms coil. So I'm just circulating those around at the moment just to keep the water temperature homogeneous. And I shall start to attach up all the tubes that are required. Gets a bit complicated, so I've got myself a little diagram of how it all goes together, and then I've numbered the hoses. So I just look at the number of the hose, look at the diagram, and the hoses are all being cut to size, so I don't have to trial and error every time. Okay, so the strike water is at temperature. So we're now going to transfer from the kettle via the pump and the hoses into the mash tun. Now I underlet into the mash tun. So let's get it going. So valve on, valve on, valve on. We need 11 litres. We're currently at 20. So we'll just throttle back the pump a little bit. Pump on. And we're starting to flow. So we'll just get the full 11 litres. That's dropping down there. We should start to see a rise in here in a second. So we'll get the full 11 litres in here. Give it a good stir. Start to monitor the temperature. And start that process. Mash paddle at the ready. Put that in there. So water's going in. So we're at 20 litres to start with. We've got to add 11, so we're going to go down to 9 litres in total. I'll put up on the screen somewhere here the mash to water ratio. I think it's something like 2.6 that I'm using for this beer. We can start to see the water coming through here. So once we get to 9, we'll stop the pump and start to stir that all in. Ten litres, 9.5, 9. Alright, let's get this all circling. Let's get all those dough balls out. It's a bit hard doing this one-handed, but at least it's only a small mash tun, not a big one. So I'm getting that well circulated, getting everything at an even temperature and everything in contact with the water. No dough balls or anything like that. We don't want anything like that that's going to decrease our efficiency and throw our numbers off. Scraping the bottom, getting everything up from the bottom to the top. Bit of a dough ball there, you can see. Just going to mash that in, get rid of that. We want to make sure all that starch can contact all the enzymes and the water. Okay, I think that is pretty well mixed in. I can't see any dough balls at all, so I'm happy with that. So I'll just get the Herm system set up. So we have the Herm system set up. So we're coming out of the bottom of the mash tun, through the pump, through this tube into the side port here, which is the side point of the Herms coil. The Herms coil then comes out. Temperature is monitored here as it comes out of the Herms coil, and then into the mash tun, where you can see it flows back in. Got a temperature sensor in there for monitoring that temperature. So I also flip around, so the HLT has two thermocouples I plug into it, one that's in the actual HLT and one that's in the Herms coil, which is the temperature sensor that's monitoring the wort coming out of the Herms coil after it's been heated up. So that is the temperature we're monitoring now. So as you can see, we've dropped excuse me, we've dropped down to 67 while we're circulating, and we're circulating through that. So I've started the pump off slow as not to cause a stock mash, but I can, from experience, I know I can ramp the pump up really high without having a stock mash. So let's just tuck that in and see where the temperature settles at. So after a couple of minutes of warming up, we are at 67.8, 67.9. So the mash temperature aiming for was 68 degrees. So pretty happy with that. See it's circulating around in there. No stock mash or anything like that. So pretty happy with that. HLT is now controlling the temperature. So we go a couple of degrees above the mash temperature. That's coming off and on. I said controlled by this temperature. So we just come back on again now. We've got the water circulating around in there, so that coil has fresh warm water being attached to it. Fresh water in contact with it all the time. So there's no cold spots or anything like that. So as you can see, reasonably red hue already, but once we get these roasted barley in there, that's going to come up a lot darker. So we've got a single hop edition today. Of East Kent Goldings. So we'll just weigh that out. So 60-minute edition cup, scale set to 0, and we're looking for 26 grams of EKG, East Kent Goldings. Aye, bingo, 26.01. I think I'm happy with that. So I use a hop sock, so I'll just transfer that over. Don't think I can do that one-handed. So doing it in stages. Tie a knot in the end. Tie a knot in the end of the hop sock. Put it over the cup. Hops are in the hop sock. I'll just rinse out that. There's always a little bit of hot residue left inside. But we'll put those in later. Okay, so we are 10 minutes into the mash. So I'm going to take a sample. I'll try and do this one-handed. It's not going to work very well. Okay, so we're 12 minutes into the mash. So it's time to do a pH. So just going to rinse out the beaker. I've just washed it out with water and collect, as you can see, and collect some circulating wort that we can cool down and check the pH with. So just a little bit there, that's all we need, just enough to get the probe. So I'm going to put that straight into some cold water. There's too much cold water in there that's floating, so let's just drop a little bit out. So I'll put that into some cold water and drop that temperature down to 20 degrees, is which I tend to do pH measurement temperatures at. pH temperature measurements at. Drop it down to 20 degrees to make a pH measurement. Okay, brewers, so we've cooled the wort down. We've got the pH meter in. We're a little bit above 20 degrees at the moment, so we'll let that cool a little bit further. But the target pH was 5.3, 5.32 at 24 degrees. I'm pretty happy with that. That's all down to the Beersmith software calculating the correct salt and acid additions to get that pH where it needs to be. So down at 20 degrees, 5.32. Very happy with that as a mash pH. Just a side note, pH meter was calibrated today just prior to brewing. Always calibrate my pH meter every day, every time I use, not every day, before every time I use it. See me now? We've now finished the mash. We've stopped the recirculation, so we can readjust the pipes so we can sparge. So now out of the HLT we're going into the kettle. Let's just turn that off before it leaks out. So we're going to come out of the mash tun, back through the herms, and now into the kettle. And then what's coming out of the HLT is sparging the mash tun, or sparging the grain. So start off with both pumps off. So the sparge water is 75 degrees. So both pumps on. Start a very low flow of sparge. We'll see that come out there. That's probably going to be even too fast. So we start a very low flow. So I start the flow going and start to build up a little bit of a level of water above the mash. So I'll let that run for a couple of minutes, and then I'll start this one up and get this pump up and get that flowing into the kettle at the same time as the sparge. But right now we need to get the dark grains in. So I'm just going to stop that sparge for a second so I can tilt this to the side and get these dark grains in all over. This is roasted barley that I'm adding in at the end of the mash. So we'll get that sparge happening, and hopefully we'll get those grains submerged while we're sparging. So we've still got a little way to go, but I think we've got enough bit of steam there. I think we've got enough on top of the mash bed to start the flow into the kettle. So we'll open up this valve and hopefully we should start to see a flow. There she goes. So it should start to come into the kettle now. We'll see the very low flow. Ooh, a bit of a burst there. Okay, so I've got a valve. Wasn't open, I've just opened that valve. That was what the burst was. So we're looking for a see if I can get a better shot. So we've got a trickle coming out into the kettle, and that's the sort of speed that I'm sparging at. Looks very clear. So back to the mash, we can see all those dark grains are now incorporated, excuse me, steam. We can see all those dark grains are now incorporated into the sparge water, and that is slowly sparging. So we've got it transferring sparge water, top of the mash tun, fly sparging, and then the mash tun is coming through the herms, which is at 75 degrees. There's a mash out step, and then into the kettle. Lovely colour is that. So once that is finished sparging, maybe probably 30 minutes, we'll come back to the boil. So we're still sparging, but we can see a beautiful, sorry about the steam, a beautiful red colour. So as we're just past the element there with the wort, we're going to get that starting to boil. So we're going to turn the element on and start that process. But I'll just cover that up to conserve the heat. Here's the sparge going on. See the dark grains at the top there. Everything's looking perfect. The boil is just about there. So I'm going to turn on the extractor here. Make sure that's all taken out. Not steaming up the room. And we're going to get the 60-minute hops into the boil. Put them in. Oh, that smells fantastic. They're in there safely, and let's start the timer. 60 minutes. In the meantime, we've got a running sample and a pre-boil. Hang on, we're going to get a boil over here. Let's just calm that down a second. We've got a running sample and a pre-boil sample. So we're going to do a gravity check and pH check of those in a second. Okay, so we're just checking the pH of the runnings, 5.75. Happy with that. So let's see what the gravity of the runnings is now. That's a little low. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but it's about 10.8. pH was in spec, so I'm not so worried about extracting tannins there. And the pre-boil gravity, I think we're looking at around, what's that, 1045, 46, 1046, 1047. Yeah, it's about 1047. So we're nearing the end of the boil. We've got the immersion wort chiller in, connected up to cold water supply and drain. We've got the oxygenation kit as such in, and that will be used to also circulate the hot wort through, just to give it one final sterilization, and then we'll attach up the oxygen when we transfer to the keg. So we got 5 more minutes of the boil left, but we've got everything in here heating up, sanitizing, ready to cool. Okay, we've reached the end of the boil. We've wrapped it up like a Christmas turkey just because the lid doesn't fit on properly with the cooler in, and I just want to protect these open edges, don't want anything getting in there. So I've wrapped it up in a bit of tin foil. We've taken a sample, lovely colour, and we're just cooling that down so we can do a gravity check. But right now we're doing a circulation, just sanitizing all of the component parts with a hot wort. The element is off, we're still at 100 degrees. Pump is on doing the circulation. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn on the cooling water. So drain on, cooling water on. So hopefully now got the cooling water going through the cooling coil that's inside. Coil. And hopefully we should start to see the temperature drop reasonably rapidly once that starts to do its thing. Here it goes. So we're circulating the wort at the same time. That is hopefully keeping the heat exchange more efficient, as the wort is circulating around and not just sitting next to the cold immersion chiller, so that it gets a chance to act upon the whole of the volume. Now that is starting to drop now. I'm not going to stand here the whole time and video this, but yeah, that's pretty warm coming out of there now. So we'll come back when we're at transfer. So we're looking at pre-boil gravity here. What have we got? So this is pre-boil gravity of the red ale, and I'm going to call that at 1055. And what are we expecting? Estimated pre-boil gravity 1054. Happy with that. Okay brewers, we've got the transfer coming on, so that valve is isolated. We're coming out of there through the pump, up, and then through the long transfer line into the fermenter or kegmenter. Now we've got the oxygen tank hooked up, and that's injecting the oxygen. You can see that happening there. You can see the bubbles, so that's taken all of the length of this line. And probably here's a good way you can see the actual bubbles in it. It's taken all that length of the line to absorb that oxygen into. So by the time we get to the other end, we've got a very small amount. So I'm hoping that the length of the line allows that oxygen to absorb into the wort, which is just what we want. I'll just check the clarity of what's coming out. There's a little bit of trub in there, but it's not too bad. Hopefully that'll reduce down as when we get further in, as it just pulls the first bit that's near the port away, and hopefully that'll reduce down. So what I'm trying to achieve here with these little loops is some turbulence. As you can see here, there's turbulence that's being created in the line, otherwise it just sits at the top, wort at the bottom, oxygen at the top. So creating these pinch points, as you can see, the oxygen is actually flowing back up as the wort is coming down here. Creating these points of turbulence is allowing better mixing into the wort, as you can see there. And that's the initial mix point where it's coming out of the stone. But that turbulence in the tube is what allows it to mix better, and dissolve. So unfortunately I didn't get footage of me cutting the packet open and putting the yeast in the conical because I simply couldn't do it one-handed. So what we've now got is the yeast sitting on top of the pre-boiled sanitized water. Now the advice I've been given when rehydrating yeast is do not stir it. Let it sit and hydrate slowly, because what it was described to me, it would be like when the yeast cells are rehydrating, they're reasonably fragile. So if you were to start spinning them around, it's quite possible you can break that membrane. So allow them to rehydrate slowly. So this temperature of this water is probably at 25 degrees. So I'm just allowing them to rehydrate slowly there on their own, not forced, as not to break those fragile membranes, cell membranes, while they're rehydrating. So I'll leave this for about 20 minutes to half an hour, make sure it's fully hydrated, and then we'll be pitching it into the fermenter. So the yeast was pitched, and here we are, approximately 12 hours later on, the following morning, and she's starting to bubble, starting to ferment away. So wait until tasting now, I guess. I hope you liked this video today. Please give us a like and a subscribe. Subscribing enables us to grow the channel and make more content. Thanks everybody. See ya.